Hey everybody, Nathan Baird from the Indy Star again with another episode of Boilers Extra. I'm flying solo again this week. Sam King, I believe, is back with us next week. He has hinted at that, wrapping up his early his early weeks of fatherhood and things. It sounds like they're going well. Maybe we can talk to him about that a little bit next week and kind of get his take on how things are going there and what it's like being a first time new father. But again, congratulations to them, and he'll be back on board soon. I think he expects to be at Monday's press conference leading into the Northwestern game. That could be wrong, but I believe that is the case. But I'm actually not alone today. I am joined by several of you. I asked for listener questions this week. Obviously, no football game this weekend, the second idle week of the schedule. And that kind of gave us a break to maybe reassess these first 7 games, which could be easier than it would be otherwise. And to look ahead to basketball, because basketball, the first exhibition on Saturday against Creighton, and really the season has started to ramp up after, the fan day scrimmage that we saw on Saturday. So we're going to start with football. And I got several questions about, obviously, when I first put this out, it was a lot of, is there going to be a coaching change mid-season? I think that has obviously been answered now that we've gotten to Thursday. And if you listen to my post-game wrap up, which a lot of you probably didn't because I'm not doing a good job of getting it out there, it's on my YouTube channel. I will try to remember to get that link out there more. I think if you search for Nathan Baird, Indianapolis Star on YouTube, it should come up. But I went into why I thought that wasn't going to happen. And listen, I know that got a little bit ramped up this week because there were other firings happening around the country. But if you look at that, those were often guys who were in their 4th, 5th, 6th year someplace. And that was a little bit more like the Daryl Hazel situation where you got into year 4 and there was really no expectation that anything was going to dramatically improve there. And then in a situation there where the AD had been hired more or less to change over the leadership of the football program, at least make that his number one priority on his way in the door. That's not the case here. You have an AD established who hired this head coach. And as I said afterwards, I just feel like there is still a belief from this administration that Ryan Walters deserves the chance to prove that he can turn things around in these last 5 games. I don't think that means realistically beating someone like Ohio State, probably, or even Penn State. And now look at what Indiana has done, and that has only probably exacerbated or exacerbated. I get those wrong. I get those wrong all the time. I get them confused. Should have gone to college as an English major or something. But you've got other games on this schedule. Northwestern and Michigan State are the ones that I think are present front of mind as still games that are clearly in your weight class, as I'm fond of saying. And, this Northwestern game, I think, is a pretty big one. Maybe it's kind of a referendum on this whole thing. I think you've at least got to, be winning this game at some point during the game. And that sounds like damning with faint praise or setting a low bar, but let's just face reality. That's what has been going on here, that just game after game after game, you're playing from behind. And you've got a team in Northwestern that isn't super talented. They're coming to your place. Can you throw the first punch, land the first punch, take control of the game early? It's just something that's been missing really for each of these past 2 seasons. And I don't know that they can really start building any momentum towards winning more games until they figure out a way to do that. So I think that my impression is that the people who make these decisions are observing these final 5 games and looking for some evidence to as to whether or not this can work. It doesn't look super promising even in the future, I know, because of what's happening in recruiting right now. Don't forget, though, last year's recruiting class was pretty good, especially by Purdue standards. Was actually really good. What were they? It was top 40 at least consensus class, if not top 35, right? It was a solid class. And they've had to rebuild. If you look at, and I'm probably going to write about this soon for IndyStar.com because I've done some of the research already. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but if you go and look at the number of 2020 and 2021 and 2022 class of 21, 22 players who are in this on this. No, it's 20 and 21. I'm confusing myself. The guys who would be third and fourth year players. Go look at the number. The guys who would be third and fourth year players. How many from those recruiting classes are? How many of them are left on this roster? And it's really sparse. It's really, really, really sparse. And it includes people like, frankly, Yanni Karloftis, who went to school up the street. It includes some guys who are more diamond in the rough kind of uh, acquisitions. I think you would look back at the latter years of Jeff Brom's tenure and think there was probably some recruiting shortcomings in there that are showing up on the field right now. That's still the task of this group and Ryan Walters to fix that, but nonetheless, I think that's where you're seeing some of this talent disparity showing up. When you look at the number of third and fourth year players that were recruited out of high school who are on the field right now, it's not deep. And those are the guys who are supposed to be leading your program. You know, it helps to have guys like Dylan Thieneman show up and be good early, but it's supposed to be these third and fourth year guys. You're seeing it some. I mean, KJ Jenkins, Gus Hartwig's even older than that, obviously. There's other guys. I'm not saying there's nobody, but there's not enough. And it's what forced them into the portal. And I guess we should maybe just jump straight to that question, too. Do you think we'll see a change in NIL philosophy when it comes to retention of great players? And this was a question that was prefaced by, it seems like they would have been better off spending whatever it took to keep Nick Skouarton. And I don't think that's true. I think that if you had Nick Skouarton on this team, but you didn't have any of the players that they brought in by transfer, and I know that a lot of them aren't starring right now, but Sheeta Silla is better than the other guys that they have options that they have at edge rusher because he keeps playing over them. You would assume that means he's better than them. Kendrick Breedlove won a starting job. Nyland Green is supposed to be a starting cornerback on this team. I know he's had his ups and downs, but he's supposed to be there. There's receivers on this team. CJ Smith never got on the field, and we don't. It's finally getting on the field for Northwestern, it sounds like, but we still don't know exactly what that is. But certainly the way they've talked about him, he's supposed to have been in this starting lineup on day one. So it isn't necessarily that that transfer class had no talent, but it certainly didn't rescue this situation. And I think the problem that you're going to see is that if they could have kept Nick Skouarton, they would have kept Nick Skouarton. But there are programs out there who are dealing with amounts of money that Purdue simply cannot catch up to. The same as that would be potentially if somebody wanted to come and hire away a head coach. They're eventually some programs are going to be able to offer what Purdue cannot offer. And that's just the reality of the situation. So where it's a tough thing though, is I think this season has exemplified that when you lose NFL talent to the portal, there's no guarantee that you'll find someone to replace it. And the Moneyball approach to sort of trying to rebuild Nick Skouarton in the aggregate obviously didn't come to fruition. I think what's maybe more worrying right now is that at this trajectory, there's a lot of unknowns right now in this program. I mean, those of you who are going on social media and calling for the coaching staff to be let go at midseason, or at least the head coach to be let go at midseason, players see that thing. I'm not saying that I'm not denying you your indignation, I guess, but it doesn't exactly make probably a healthy situation on the team. And it's going to make the next Nick Skouarton maybe question whether he should be here before you even get the Nick Skouarton breakthrough. Again, it's not me excusing the performance on the field, but I think you need to start thinking about this a little bit holistically and, direct your anger in the right directions, I suppose, but just know that there's a lot of unknowns right now. And there's a lot of things that are up in the air, and the performance over the next 5 games might influence it. It might not. I don't know. But I think the danger right now is, like I said, you just brought in a recruiting class that you were pretty excited about, the Shamar Rigby and Teron Grant and the other guys who were in that true freshman class, some of whom have already been on the field. Like, that was a group that they thought they were going to build something off of. And yes, it's troubling what's going on with the 2025 class, but you still have this here to anchor it. But you don't have to lose that many guys from that class even to really take a chunk out of your program. I think Purdue is probably still going to be very active in the transfer portal this winter. I think it has to be. I think what you're seeing right now, and maybe this is something that Sam and I should delve into when he gets back. Like, if you were to just, because I think the answer is different than what we thought it was going to be to the question I'm about to ask. If you had asked us this in preseason, at how many positions, the 22 starting positions, does Purdue have one of the 10 best players or even 12 best players in the Big Ten at that position? And I think before the season, there are some names we would have assumed would be on there, and they're not. And some of it's performance, some of it's injury. We haven't necessarily gotten to see the best of some people, but you look around, like, how many positions would you say that about right now? They have to raise the talent level in this program even more than they thought they did last year. And like I said, there's just a lot of unknowns right now. It's going to probably still have to be a deep class. You would assume there's going to be some attrition just because there always is. And that probably still doesn't mean, though, that they're bringing in the elite of the elite. Because even if Purdue can match the money, are you going to, if everything's equal, are you going to Ohio State or Oregon or Texas A&M, maybe even, or Purdue where it is right now? If you're starting either way, or you have a good chance to start at those other places, even that might be where you're leaning, regardless of what the money is. So it's not just about the money. It's not. Purdue doesn't have enough NIL resources, I don't believe, and from anything I've heard, that it can just go out and buy elite players in the portal to dig out of this overnight. We thought that they had taken at least a stabilizing step with what they did in the portal last year, and it was wrong. It didn't get there, and it didn't make up for what like I was saying before, like some other deficiencies that I think there are on this roster. Another question: why is hiring a head coach such a random crapshoot? I condensed some of these questions. Thanks to everyone who sent them. I'm just kind of trying to get at the nugget of some of these things. I don't think crapshoot's the word that I would use. In all walks of life, some people meet the moment when they move up a level, whether that's job responsibilities, competition level, whatever. Some aren't as successful. Sometimes there are X factors that play into that. When you're hiring a first-time head coach, though, it's really helpful that you don't have to start from scratch. And I've said this before, but like Ohio State people used to hate when I would bring up Purdue examples, and you're probably gonna hate when I bring up these Ohio State examples, but they're really the only two situations that I have a lot of knowledge with. So I'm going to use some of those examples sometimes. Ryan Day was an internal promotion at Ohio State. He was the interim coach in 2018 when Urban Meyer was suspended, and then he became the head coach in 2019, which was my first year covering Ohio State. Now, that was an internal promotion of a young first-time head coach, hot coordinator name, all those things. Even though he was already on staff for 2 years, had been the quarterback's coach, was there for the year that Dwayne Haskins threw off for all those yards and lost to Purdue. But he inherited literally Urban Meyer's entire apparatus. Like, some of the assistants, at least the best ones, he wanted to keep. Larry Johnson, other guys like that. The whole strength and conditioning operation, Mickey Marotti, like, recognized as one of the best in the business. And the recruiting machine, a guy named Mark Pantoni, like, nationally recognized for just the recruiting operation that they've had going there. It's people who have worked in that machine have then, like spores, been dispersed across the country, and now they are leading player personnel departments all over the country. And there was just a well-oiled machine. I don't know what other word to keep using, that Ryan Day got to take the control of. Didn't have to start everything from scratch. Yes, he put his own stamp on things. And yes, over time, you have to hire your own people more and more, with some success, with some misses. But it helped to be walking into a very stable platform. Um, and Ryan Walters didn't get to do that. Jeff Brom took everything with him when he left, as far as I can tell, or at least the vast majority of everything with him when he left. They were all, a lot of them were Louisville people when they came to Purdue, and he was taking his brothers back home and taking other people back home. So that all makes sense. And I believe Ryan Walters when he said he'd been preparing for this for his adult life, like what he would do as a first time head coach. It's just really difficult. And um, as we've already seen, like to make sure that you hit on, you miss on a recruiting or a coordinator hire. You don't you misjudge something talent wise. Like it doesn't take that much to send things kind of really off balance. So this person asked this question and brought up a bunch of examples of like, why does, hiring some group of fives work? Like, I think they mentioned Kurt Signetti, but then the Darrell Hazels fail. And I think there were some other things at the start of Darrell Hazel's tenure that worked against him. He wasn't allowed to bring in, like I was just saying, like being able to like trust the people around you and have a rapport with the people around you and be on the same page from day one is, I think, really important when you're starting a program. And he wasn't allowed to bring in his staff. He had to go hire other people because for that everything I've heard from how that era went, he wasn't allowed to bring in the people he necessarily wanted to, because I don't think they wanted to pay those people what he was wanting to pay or was going to pay coordinators and things. So I think that was a bad first step out of the gate. And not saying that he did a good enough job in other areas, but I think that hurt. And I think that the Kurt Signetti model, and Indiana's not the first program to do this. He's not the only example, but I think this is the new model. And it's that you hire if you're someone like Indiana or Purdue's stature, you hire a group of five head coach, and he brings his staff, and in this era, brings his best players with him. You've got to still have a good NIL operation because you've got to keep players too. You've got to keep your best players. And Indiana had to do some of that during this transition. But they believe in that coach already. They've been winning with that coach already, and they're leveling up. And let's face it, like when you're talking about the best, really good group of five levels and the lowest tier of the Big Ten, there's not a big separation. And if you can bring enough of those guys with you, that's what really stabilizes your roster. I think we've seen that play out at Indiana this year. And I think that's what more and more teams are going to do. And if and when Purdue makes a coaching change down the line, I imagine that is going to be a part of the discussion. Well, I mean, I just made it one, and I'll be writing about it. So it probably, it will almost definitely be part of the conversation, at least what's coming from me. Will Ryan Walters still call the offense? This one, when it was asked, was more theoretic, but we talked to him on Tuesday, and he confirmed, yes, he is still calling the offense. I think for the foreseeable future. I might be in the minority. In fact, I think I am in the minority. I think it's still the right call, or at least he should not go back to the defense full time. And my point all along has been that defensively right now, Purdue is very volatile. It's been volatile all season. There were times during even the Oregon game where you saw the defense step up and win its series, win its possessions. And we've seen that throughout the season, that the defense at times, even sometimes for an entire half, will be more or less like doing its job very well. And then it either runs out of steam late or it gives up some big plays and any number of things. So I still think that the defense has been volatile. I've been trying to do this. I can't get the hand signals down right. It's like the defense has been volatile, and then the offense has been just, you can't do that. It's like rubbing your tummy and patting your head. You can't do both. But like the offense is still just down here. Against Illinois, you finally saw the offense get some life, and they almost lined it up. I think I've probably done that hand gesture before, so apologies. But I think you've still got to fix this offense. You have to get, even the Illinois game where the defense gave up 43 points in regulation, and it gets put down as like the first time they've given up 50 in back-to-back or whatever, but really it was 43 in regulation. The offense had 3 points at halftime. I mean, this offense perpetually makes this team play from behind. even when this defense plays really well or well enough to win, it is still playing from behind when you get into the second halves of games. And the offense has to, the one time this year, I mean, the mistake was easy for me to say. The mistake, I think, was not having a contingency already built into the coaching staff somewhere. Like Jason Simmons seems like a really good guy, and maybe he'll have a good future in this business. I don't think the second year college coach analyst could be your only backup plan if your offensive coordinator wasn't available, either by you having to fire him, uh, illness, alien abduction. I don't know. Like, whatever reason the offensive coordinator wasn't there, you kind of got caught flat footed. I think that was a mistake of how the staff was built. There's nothing Ryan Walters can do about that now. But the only time the offense has shown any life, really, or any ability to take over a game and like take charge of a game was Illinois. And I think they've got to try to replicate that against Northwestern. Uh, and I'm going to be writing a little bit about this quarterback situation because I really think it's interesting that is having two quarterbacks confusing? Is it a distraction? Is it an opportunity? Northwestern doesn't know who it's preparing for. They say, either these guys can run this kind of offense, but they're also saying there are wrinkles within the offense that, obviously Hudson Card, I think, is a more refined downfield passer than Ryan Brown is. So does it give you some kind of an advantage that Northwestern doesn't know who to expect and that you might be putting out different guys over the course of that game? Is it that Hudson Card goes in, he's got a new perspective on what works in this offense from watching the last 2 weeks, and how he can go in and lead the more conventional drives, but now you've got Ryan Brown in on red zone things, on goal line things, to add that running quarterback wrinkle that makes things so tough on defenses. Right now, I think everything is on the table. You've just got to find a way to win that game. And the best version of Purdue that we have seen since Indiana State, which I've pretty much just dismissed, the best one that we've seen in a Power 5 game, even though they gave up 43 points, was the Illinois game. And I think you've got to try to replicate that dynamic against Northwestern. And don't forget, yes, they gave up 43 points, but 7 of them came off of a bad special teams mistake. 7 of the points they gave up the week before to Wisconsin were off a special teams mistake. The defense got put in some bad positions there. And again, that was other aspects. The defense is not going to be great. And I don't think, by the way, when Ryan Walters was calling the defense, I don't think it was that great, to be honest. He wasn't turning that defense into something great. Right now, there are talent limitations and they keep losing guys, so that doesn't help. But I think if whatever his perspective is injected, you've got to win this Northwestern game. You have to win this Northwestern game. I think it greatly improves your chances of being able to beat a Michigan State or be in the mix in the bucket game, which I know sounds like a weird thing to be saying, but just the way these two teams have diverged this season. But I would say he has to stay. If he's not going to keep calling the plays, he can't go back to being the defensive coordinator. His attention has to be split. And I think that's been obvious with the way things have worked the last 2 weeks. That even though they got shut out by Oregon, you actually saw better things against Oregon in a shutout than you maybe saw in some earlier games this season. I thought there was a little bit more ball movement, a little bit more life. So I think you have to stick with it at least for one more week. We'll do this last on the football topics because I don't want to talk about it very long. But since people asked, it kind of became a topic of conversation. Several times in press conferences, Walters has come off IMO, in my opinion, for the kids. Way too defensive to your questions. Best example, the bye week question Friday. Do you agree? Does he not expect some tough questions given how they've performed? Ryan Walters has answered plenty of tough questions this year, and I think he's been very honest with us when he can be. This is a frustrating time for everybody. For people who didn't hear, I asked, and I should have gone back and looked for the exact wording. I asked what I thought was a rather innocuous question. It was something like, considering the circumstance, yes, you came into this season with a process and a schedule and what you were going to do week by week. Considering the circumstances, is there anything you're changing about how you're handling the bye week. It was a very broad question, and I thought it was I didn't expect it to be a question that would elicit, yes, some grumpiness from him. But I can't control how he hears questions, especially in the post game fog of war. Like, and listen, it's been going on now for 6 weeks, 6 games. They don't really have great answers for it. I could come on here and say, what do you mean? Why did we lose the game? Do you know how many players we have who would rank in the top 12 of the Big Ten? Like, I can come in and say that. I can come in and say that's why I think Purdue is losing games. Ryan Walters can't come in and do that because he's throwing his whole team under the bus. And ultimately, it is his responsibility. Ultimately, he is the person compensated to find out a way to make this work. But there's almost nothing positive to talk about right now. I do think when we talked to him Tuesday, there was more levity. I thought he was a little bit more relaxed because, again, we're talking to them a lot of times, 15, 20 minutes after a game. You just got beat 35-0. It's your 6th loss in a row, and probably the last thing in the world he wanted. Like, think of it, there's got to be some analogy in your life, right? Where something's been going on. You're not usually at a press conference, but you're like, the last thing in the world he wanted was my hand to go up to get the mic to ask any question. He was probably just tired of it. And it's his job to answer the questions, as they said on Mad Men. Like, that's what the money's for. He has to answer our questions. I think we have asked tough questions. I think he understands. It's not like he's waiting for us to. He doesn't have to wait for our questions to say we're a bad football team right now. But I didn't take it personally. I like when I come out of a situation like that, it's just occupational hazard. I like to ask, how could I have asked that better? Or when could I have asked that better? That might be a better question to ask him off to the side, another staff member off to the side. This isn't fun for any of those people right now. This is like a dream job, and then now you're in the middle of this. It's been a gut punch for everyone who's mad at Purdue's football staff right now. Believe me, they feel like they've let you down. I mean, take the names off of it. Any team in the country, any staff in the country of any team would feel that way, and they feel that way if they lose any game often to some extent. Matt Painter has talked about before that you remember the losses more than you remember the big wins. And it's such what a rough way to go through life in some ways. But that's your competitor, and that's guys who are built that way are the ones that you want in these positions. So doesn't change what questions I ask necessarily, but it does affect whether I take the answers personally. And I don't. Like, I thought I also don't think I asked the question well, if you go back and listen to it. And I kind of flubbed trying to follow up on it. So Ryan Walters will call a bad play. Sometimes I'll ask a bad question. Sometimes the bad play makes you guys mad. The bad question makes him mad. I don't know if mad's even the right word. I think he was just these guys have a lot of pride, and they no one there is arguing that this is going well. But I also think they don't like the insinuation of, well, aren't you just going to blow it up and start over? Because I also think, and they're probably right about this, that isn't the solution either. That's a tough thing to do in the middle of a season when you've been setting your agenda this whole time. So I thought it was interesting. There were other people who jumped on that and made it kind of a little story, and I thought that was maybe a little much. But I guess they were kind of jumping on his answer. I do think it was a bad answer from an optics standpoint. Like, you're 1-6, you've lost 6 in a row. Your performance is among the worst in Power 4. Like, don't, on both sides of the ball. So, like, don't maybe say I'm confused why we need to change our process or something like that. It didn't look great. I didn't mean to be. I wasn't trying to put him on the spot, but it didn't look great. Probably something we probably both wish we had handled that press conference better. I could have asked a better question. He could have answered it better. Let's move on to a more important topic. We only got like one question. My previous job, we used to call them nonsense questions. We only got one that had nothing to do with sports. It was just kind of more of like, what else do you think about? What else makes you happy? And what else are you into? And so someone asked me, what are your top 5 TV shows, and include a hidden gem? And it was pretty easy to come up with 3. Like, my favorite comedy of all time is Curb Your Enthusiasm. My favorite dramas of all time are The West Wing and The Wire. I think those are hardly like deep cuts, right? Like those are pretty widely loved shows. I think I would put The Simpsons on this list, and I don't watch The Simpsons currently. They're still doing new episodes of The Simpsons. It's been on like, I mean, I'm 46, and that thing's been on since I was a kid. So, I mean, they just cranking those things out forever. And I don't think they're as good as they were in like the glory days, but like the glory days Simpsons, like I don't watch it very often. I don't go back and rewatch it, but it's one of those things that's like always in my head. Like I'll just remember just hilarious moments from the Simpsons and think about them. Maybe go try to find them on YouTube, that sort of thing. And to round up my top five, I threw Breaking Bad on here. I had trouble like pinpointing my number five. There's like some comedies I could probably put on there too, but that was it's just one that I had a lot of respect for the way that they paced Breaking Bad. From just a storytelling standpoint, they would really drag out some really taut moments and make you kind of feel that show. And I thought that was really impressive. The hidden gem, I don't know if this is really that hidden, but they did a season of the show called Severance. It's Adam Scott, who people might know from Parks and Rec and some other things. John Turturro was on there. I'm trying to remember who else was who people would know was on that. Now I can't even remember. Is it on Apple? I think it's on Apple Plus, and it's a show about a. It's kind of hard to describe. I would say don't know what it's about and just start watching it. And I got pretty hooked on it. They got interrupted by the writer's strike. They had to take some time off, and I think the second season is finally going to be coming out soon. Just a really interesting show. There's an author I really like named George Saunders who writes more kind of like dystopian, sort of postmodern things. And this has a very postmodern vibe to it. And Ben Stiller is involved in producing, maybe directing it too, I think, some of the episodes. And he had at one point had optioned the George Saunders story. And this isn't a George Saunders thing, but I wonder if just like he was in that mindset and that helped him create this show. So I'm looking forward to watching that when it comes back out. So if you haven't found that and you like things that are kind of like not like sci-fi, but like kind of right on the border. Actually, you almost would call this a kind of science fiction. Really like kind of cerebral shows. I think it's a lot of fun. It's funny. It's like dark humor. So Severance is my recommendation. Let's finish up with some basketball questions. A lot of the questions were essentially a version of who are going to be the starting five players on opening night. Someone asked me, will First be the starting five ever again, or is Cam Heidi firmly entrenched? And how often will the smaller lineup with Trey Kaufman-Renn at the 5 and Heidi at the 4? And so I don't know 100% who they're going to start on Saturday night. We talked to Matt Painter on Thursday. I'm recording this on Wednesday. I don't know if he will tell us who they're going to start. I will say he said weeks ago when I was talking to him that they had, in the summer, they were mixing up their lineups a lot. And then he backed off of that and started to figure out who the main five would be, or the other two would be around. He started to play Trey Kaufman-Renn, Braden Smith, and Fletcher Loyer together. He stopped spreading those guys out. Those three guys started playing together, and then it became of finding the next fit. And the first rotation, when they split into black and gold teams scrimmage last Saturday, the first lineup with those three guys also had Caleb First and Jakari Harris. Now, I think if I had to guess, I think that might be the starting lineup on Saturday night. I do think they are going to play Cam Heidi at the 4. Matt Painter said they're going to play Heidi at the 4 when Trey Kaufman-Renn plays the 5. And it really is more of a true small ball lineup at that point, because what's Heidi, like 6'7", 6'8", instead of, always having like a more like 6'9", 6'10", 6'11" guy at the 4. Painter even describes him more as like, a 3-and-D kind of player. So then when you're moving that down to the 4, you're getting a very specific kind of lineup that you're going for there. But that would be my guess. I will say, I don't think there's going to be one starting lineup for every game as there was last year for all 39 games. It was those same 5 guys. And that could be because Painter tinkers with different mixes to find the best one to start games. It might also be to feature different looks against different opponents. I don't think this is going to be, last year, there was so much certainty. You brought back so much from that previous year that you could just like lock in. Like they started that season knowing what that team would look like whenever that season finished, wherever that season finished. And this year, it's just a much more um it's like a choose your own adventure book right now. Like it could go in a couple different directions, and Matt Painter's going to get to tinker with that a little bit this year. And I think it's going to be kind of fun to observe and document, as I've talked about before. I'm looking forward to this basketball season, mostly because I don't know what to expect from it. And that kind of leads into another question. Did anyone ask what the fortunes of the B-ball team will be? And I did a best case, worst case thing for our Indy Star season preview coverage. I had to turn that in earlier today. So I don't want to give away all of that. You guys can read it at indystar.com. I'll defer to that. I will just say I think there's a high floor, right? I mean, this team should probably still be in Big Ten championship contention. It should still be in the conversation. And then there's a ceiling that's worth speculating about. But I think it's a ceiling that's worth that will probably depend on some best case scenarios coming to fruition. Whether that's the variant, or not the variance, but like the just the depth of offensive skills that Trey Kaufman has been working on, those things showing up in games and being a plus, and what they think is going to happen off the pick and roll with Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman and other guys, that holding up. Does the 3-point shooting that you had last season, when you had Zach Edey in the middle and defenses always had to account for him, and maybe that's only one step, but maybe that makes a difference on a closeout somewhere. Like, can you replicate a 40% for the season or more 3-point shooting again? But the thing is, does Daniel Jacobson's rim protection show up on the field, on the court enough, because he's developed in enough other areas that you feel like you can keep him out on the floor? Like there's a lot of question marks right now, but there's also, it seems to be a lot of answers, because all those things I was just mentioning are things that are like well within, it seems like, those players' reach. You're not asking anybody to make a huge jump. The closest thing I guess that they're asking is the small ball concept, the idea that Trey Kaufman-Renn can go be a 5, and like then down the line the dominoes will fall that make that a really a matchup that really helps. Like Matt Painter loves the idea of that matchup against certain 5s for Trey Kaufman-Renn. And that's not really asking him, I guess, to make a huge jump. But I don't think he came to Purdue expecting to play a lot of 5, and over time he's just kind of acclimated to it. So just one of the many things that I'm really looking forward to seeing how it plays out. I do think that as I have watched this team in the preseason a few times, this freshman class is like showed up ready to help, man. CJ Cox, Jakari Harris, Jacobson, especially, you definitely see them like where they fit in the rotation. Did get a couple questions on Riley Burgess. Like with Burgess on the rise, is there a chance Jacobson redshirts? I don't think so, because Painter keeps bringing up Jacobson's rim protection, and it's something I don't think they really have without him. And it's sort of a staple. Like you can go back through the years, like there's always kind of someone in the mix that can do that for Purdue. And plus, if he develops as expected, when you're 7'4" and you can move and you've got some shot, like you're an easier NBA projection than Zach Edey was at the same age, right? Or at the same stage of development, maybe even. So if he's not going to be here 5 years, are you really thinking of him in terms of a 5-year timeline, I guess, or even 4? Like you don't want him to have only been here 3 years and you used one on a red shirt, right? So that's not me. I don't have any inside knowledge of how they're thinking about that. I'm just kind of speculating. Again, sometimes you have to just take the names off of everybody. It's like nameless team, 7'4" freshman who can move, who's got some shooting ability. Like that sounds like an NBA player to me. So are you using a red shirt? That seems unlikely. It's not quite the same equation with Burgess, because there are so many other guys on this team who fit that same physical profile. Burgess is shooting really well. I've been really impressed with Burgess, and Painter has obviously been really impressed. Like Painter keeps just bringing it up on his own. Like I was at a practice where he was like really like complimentary of him on the court during the game, and has brought up a couple times just like how good of a player he thinks he's going to be. But he regrets some of the red shirt decisions he didn't make. I haven't heard him say we made a mistake red shirting that guy, but I have heard him say multiple times, whether it's Ryan Smith, whether it's Ryan Klein, whether it's Grady Eifert. There might be somebody even in there that I'm forgetting. Like he regrets not redshirting those guys, because by the time like Grady Eifert's maybe the best example in some ways. Like you got to the end of his career, and if you'd had another year of him and what he could have been, another year of physical development, just coming in a little bit behind from a competition standpoint, maybe that you would have got something even better out of him. But those are the things he regrets, and it really makes him think hard about not getting impressed with someone in the preseason and then looking back in January and February and he's playing 10 minutes a game or 8 minutes a game. And is that making a difference for you? There were definitely some games. I remember Ryan Klein's freshman year that there was that game at Pittsburgh, right? That they don't win without him. So it wasn't like he wasn't still an asset for that team, but you can't look just year by year as your head coach. You've got to look at in longer chunks than that. You have to have a longer view than that. And I, I, it's going to be an interesting decision, and it's one I know that he's wrestling with right now, and one that they're probably not going to talk about publicly, really, because they don't like this kind of speculation. But I don't know how you talk about the roster without bringing that up, because they redshirt so liberally, like they do it as much or more than any team in the country. So just something to keep an eye on here in the next couple weeks, and maybe also this is sort of a roster question too. And I think we're going to wrap up here. Is it concerning that there's so much young talent that some will transfer? Well, I guess, do you wish Purdue had not recruited some of those guys? Like, it depends on how much you buy into like the iron sharpens iron idea. But to me, it's like you bring in as many. Like, there's a fine line, because it can create problems. It can be a locker room issue if you've got even sometimes just one guy who isn't getting the minutes he thinks he's supposed to be getting. But it's often decided on the court. It's often decided in Cardinal court for the most part. Like, who's in there winning consistently? Those are the guys who play. And I think you worry, if you're going to worry about transfers, here are the programs you should worry about transfers. Do you have a culture problem where guys don't want to be around? That's not Purdue. I don't think anyone would argue that's Purdue. Are you getting lured away by money? I don't think there's much danger of that at Purdue. I suppose there's a scenario where someone can drop a bag so big that Purdue on its own can't accommodate. Some of that is going to get, we think, maybe evened out though with the now that schools can pay players directly starting next year. Not sure exactly how that's all going to unfold, but we're keeping an eye on it. I don't think you ever worry about guys leaving because they're good, but not good enough to get the minutes that they want. Because you've got somebody better. And also, the other thing that is happening right now is the young guys who have come in are in some cases jumping past other guys already because they're better basketball players, it looks like. And that's just how it is. Again, if I can reach back to the Ohio State football example, like every year they had guys jumping in the transfer portal to leave Ohio State because they weren't getting on the field. And you can go back and look, and they're guys who, I mean, I don't even know if some of them would have had Purdue offers, because they were 4-star talents, sometimes even 5. I've seen 5-star guys come to Ohio State, never get on the field, and transfer. Not that common, but it happens. And sometimes that's as much on a miss by the recruiting rankings as it is anything the player did wrong. It's not like they were campaigning to be a 5-star. But my point being that Ohio State never really worried about guys who were transferring out. At some point, and basketball and football are also different. You got many more players to worry about, to deal with in football. You got more contingencies built into the operation. In basketball, you do have to worry more about, especially like mass transfers, just from a depth standpoint. You don't want to take a big chunk out of the heart of your program. But any one transfer, I don't think you look at, again, take the names off of it. Random freshman comes in and he's good, but he's always kind of like ninth and they're only playing 8 guys and he can't. And then maybe as a sophomore, okay, that's his chance. But then that just happened to be the year that they brought in a stud at his position and that guy goes right in the starting lineup. Like, it's not really anybody's fault. It's just competition. And I don't think you worry about that much. Because I know how fans I think of this. Because when a guy's coming in, I don't think you think about his limitations as much. You try to see, well, this is what this guy could become. CJ Cox could become the next, Jakari Harris could become the next. And, what kind of first team All Big Ten, All American level can some of these guys aspire to? And if they transfer out, you feel like you've missed something because they didn't achieve that. But that's not really realistic. That's not really how the world works. The answer is usually somewhere in between, right? And I think the good thing you would say about Purdue, from everything I've experienced covering them before and being around them again now, it's very much a meritocracy. Like, show you're going to do your job, show you're going to win. There isn't a lot of games that get played. It's a lot of, did you show me that you need to be on the floor? Are you beating, when you go head to head with that other guy? I thought it was really fun watching Jakari Harris and CJ Cox go head to head the other day at that scrimmage. And we heard all this great things about, what Jakari Harris is going to be defensively, what he already is defensively. It's why he might be starting to open this season. And then CJ Cox is like picking his pocket and taking it back for a layup in one of the scrimmage sessions. And like, that stuff is great. And that stuff is, by the way, to go back to the Trey Kaufman-Wren conversation for a second, why is there a lot of confidence in that building that idea is going to work? It's because multiple people have told me that he basically dominated, like kicked Zach Edey's butt in practice multiple times. Now, I'm not saying he is going to play at a Zach Edey level, because it's more about like what he was able to do with his skills against a player like Zach Edey, who obviously has great attributes, but also some vulnerabilities when you're playing against a smaller guy. But that's what they're shooting for. And it's all meritocracy. It's all, what have you earned? And it's going to be really kind of fascinating to watch, because I think right now, I mean, I know just from talking to them that they see a lot of potential answers. They just don't know which ones they're going to play up front, or which ones there's going to be some interchangeability. I think it's going to be fun to watch. So that's all for this episode. Thanks for all of you who sent in questions. We're going to do this again from time to time. Please send in questions. Just send me a DM on Twitter, or just at me, or whatever it is, or send me email in Baird at Gannett, GANNETT.com. Just always looking for feedback, always looking for questions, suggestions, whatever else you want to do. Throw in some nonsense too. It doesn't all have to be football and basketball, and we'll have some fun. So thanks for listening. We will talk to you next week.